to those that are on the call live, and then also to those that are watching online. I'm really excited. So if you don't have your book today, we're doing the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, and we're going to be looking at the budget model, which is going to start on page 152. Now, if you've been joining us for the past few classes, we've really been working through the book. We've talked about mindset, the myth understandings of the millionaire real estate agent. We've talked about what it looks like to think a million, the 3 L's that are the foundation, right? Leads, listings, leverage. And right now we're working through the 4 models of the millionaire real estate agent. Last week, we talked about the lead generation model, right? The lead generation model. And when we talk about the lead generation model, essentially, and we've also, the week before, we talked about the economic model, right? So they all work in tandem. They all work together. The economic model says, my goal is to make a profit of X. And once I determine my profit of X, I know that I need to reverse engineer my business to understand the activities that I need to do to accomplish X. Because if we know that we have a profit goal of 100K, and we have expenses, right? Expenses and cost of sales of say 25K, right? We know that we need to make 125, right? Now we can look at what's the average price point of homes I sell. We can look at what's our average gross commission income, right? And we can start breaking that down. So if we have an average gross commission income of 12,500, that's 10 transactions, right? That ends up being 10 transactions. So we're able to break it down and say, okay, now I know this is how many I have to close. But we know that in any market, there is a fallout ratio, right? There is a fallout ratio that says that on average, right, at least 25% of transactions tend to fall out of escrow, right? That's the average. So we know, okay, if I have to close 10, well, what does that mean? That means that I have to open a higher number, right? A higher number. I believe it's between 12 to 13, right? Transactions that we need to open in order to close the 10, right? The 10 that is the goal. So that's what the economic model tells us, right? And the economic model helps us break that down so that we have an understanding of our activities based on our profit goals. The lead generation model is the next part of that, right? The lead generation model says there's a systematic method to building my database, right? There's a systematic method to building my database. The 12 direct, as it talks about in MREA, or as we know it now is in MREA 2, right? That has not been released yet. The 18, right? 18 to connect. The 8x8, right? The 8x8, which is to essentially solidify, cement the relationship, which in MREA 2 is the 7 to cement, right? The 7 to cement the relationship. And then what was formerly known as the 33 touch, the 36 touch, right? The 36 touch that every single person in our database goes on, right? That's how we systematically feed and communicate to our database. And what we know to be true is that when we do a true 36 touch, they've got 24 biweekly neighborhood nurtures, right? A quarterly call from us asking for the business, a birthday card, an anniversary card, maybe some social media posts, a client event, the client info packets that we can send out, right? All of those different touches. What we know is that after 36 touches, once your database is truly activated, we should be getting about a deal for every 12 people. Minimum, right? A deal or a referral for every 12 people. If we're truly systematic, right? If we truly follow that goal. So that's what the lead generation model tells us. Now, the budget model is a little different, right? Economic model is how much money do I want to make and what is that going to take? Lead generation model is, okay, here's how I go out and get leads and feed them into my system. And now when we look at the budget model, this is understanding how to keep my money accountable and how to make sure that I am profitable, right? How do I make sure and ensure that I am profitable? Because here's the thing that I know to be true about budgets. All too often, and I had a friend, he told this story that he was at an award ceremony, a real estate award ceremony. And he was sitting at a table with a couple different top producers, and they were being awarded based on their production. And, you know, one of the producers, she was awarded for being so successful. She had done over 250K GCI, right? Was just a very, what quote unquote successful agent. And so she went up, accepted her award. And when she came back to the table, she seemed very solemn. In fact, she seemed sad, almost depressed, right? She seemed as though her eyes were getting watery and as though she wanted to cry. And so this gentleman, he turned to her and he asked the question, he said, "Why do you look so sad, right? You're being awarded here on the basis of your production. Why do you look so sad?" And she said, "I'm being awarded for how much money I made, and yet I can hardly make ends meet. And yet I can hardly pay my bills, and yet I'm not keeping most of it," right? That's why the budget model is so important, and why it's so important that we look at this and look at, are we running our business as a business, or are we running our business as a practitioner, right? Are we running our business as a practitioner? Now, I'm of the opinion that if you get into real estate, we get into real estate, why? We want to be business owners. We want to gain, we see the opportunity for unlimited income. We see the opportunity for us to have no ceiling, right? No ceiling on our potential, which is phenomenal in real estate. And yet too often people overspend and don't hold their money accountable. So if you look at page, there's going to be 3 items that are part of the budget model, starting on page 153, right? 153. The first is lead with revenue, right? Lead with revenue. We'll get into that. The second is going to be play red light, green light. And the third one is going to be stick to the budget. Now let's talk about this idea of leading with revenue. Especially in a market like this one, right? We're in a really unique market where we have, how do I put it? Where there's so much that has to be done virtually, which means all of a sudden we do have some additional expenses. I'm very big on how do we lead with revenue. When an agent gets into the business, I cannot tell you how many times I'll sit with a new agent and they're like, I want to send, you know, and I'm going to know. So lead generation takes one of 2 things. True lead generation takes one of 2 things. It either takes a lot of time or it takes a lot of money, right? It takes one or the other. It takes time or money. And very often you have somebody that gets into the business and they want to know if they should go spend on the hottest new website, right? And if they should go spend on creating all this branding material, right? Because they want their brand to look hot and they want, you know, the top up and coming signs and all of these different things that they feel sometimes that they need in order to be successful in this business. Now, is it possible that you could utilize, you know, branding to help get leads? Absolutely. You know, there are agents that have absolutely used sophisticated websites to gain leverage, and yet that's not the only lead generation opportunity. And if you have zero revenue, is that the place to start? Probably not, right? So leading with revenue means we want to make sure that we are lead generating. So it says here on page 154 at the very end, it says a good here is a company. So let me start a little bit before. As we saw in the dot-com boom and bust era, some companies perceived having smaller upsides ended up outliving many high-profile companies by following better business practice. A good example is a now defunct software company, which was a poster child for what we call leading with expenses. Don't lead with expenses, right? Here was a company that spent millions on Super Bowl ads before they had positive cash flow in their business. Unfortunately, many real estate agents take this same field of dreams, if I spend it, they will come, approach. They think if they spend a lot of money up front, the business will come. If you hold to the lead with revenue approach, it will force you to lead with lead generation and sales, not expenses, right? With lead generation and sales, not expenses. So that's a really good example of, we had an era of a lot of these companies that came into the market, not just in real estate, right? In every industry that came into the market and said, we're going to spend, and hopefully we'll make that profit later. And a lot of technology companies do that, right? A lot of technology companies, actually, sorry guys. A lot of technology companies actually do that. And they lead without having the data or the information up in the front. And they hope and they pray that it's going to work out, right? Now, in real estate, I don't want you guys to just live on the let's hope and pray it's going to work. Let's spend a lot of money and let's hope and pray that it's going to work out, right? We want to hold our money accountable. We want to lead with revenue, which is going to force you to focus on lead generation and sales, right? That's item number one. Number two, red light, green light. So how many people remember playing red light, green light as a kid, right? What happens? They say green light, you move forward. They say red light, stop, right? We stop. We need to have that same approach to our money, right? We need to have that same approach to our money. So it's not, we want to look at the results. We don't want to be as concerned. Okay, so the premise here, right? If we choose to pursue a particular type of lead generation, we want to hold our money accountable. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I jumped on a Zoom with one of our teams. They decided that one of the forms of lead generation that they're going to be implementing is Facebook ads, right? It's Facebook ads. They did Facebook ads in small increments, right? In small increments of $20 so that they could see the results. And what they found is that you had one ad over here that got 47 leads, right? And an ad over here that got 9. And so we want to inspect that. We want to dig into that, right? We want to know how high was the quality of the leads here versus here. What was the difference in the advertising? Are we getting results from it, right? Are we getting results from it? Because now we can pivot, right? We can pivot a little bit and play red light, green light. They said green light, let's run it. Red light, let's stop and let's inspect the results that we're getting so that we can correct it and move forward again. Now, had they got 0 leads and they kept spending the money, would that be playing red light, green light? No, that's somebody that passes through the red light, right? That takes the stop sign. We don't do that, right? We can't do that with our business. We have to hold our money accountable, right? That's what we mean by red light, green light. And part of that with red light, green light is going to be important because there are things that sometimes we need to create some type of expense around. There are things that are going to cost us money, right? There are things that are going to cost us money. What is an example of that? Well, sometimes we need to go buy signs, right? When we were doing open houses, getting open house signs cost money, right? And yet, what is the return when more people at the open house, right? It allowed us to have more people at the open house. So there was a cost benefit, right? A cost benefit. That's the importance of red light, green light. The other item on red light, green light. So I think this is really important. On one side, red light, green light is really important for how we spend in our business. Another exercise, and this is gonna flow right into stick with the budget. And you guys have heard me say this before. I don't have a yellow highlighter in front of me right now. If I did, I'd pull that out as well, right? But I have my pink, I don't have a yellow highlighter in front of me, but I've got my pink and green highlighter. An exercise to look at, what am I spending in my business? Now, I'm gonna know, if you're new in the business and you have not set up a separate entity for your business, that is something I recommend at some point, right? That is something that is important when you're working your business. A secondary recommendation, if you're not ready to set up an LLC or a corporation yet, and you can talk to an accountant about which one is going to be best for you in your unique situation, I always recommend at least having a separate account, like a separate debit card, a separate account, so that you can track your expenses separately, right? If you've not done that before, that's a great exercise to start now, right? Is that you have a separate way that you're allocating your business, that you're reconciling your business expenses on a monthly basis minimum, right? On a monthly basis minimum. You can use a free software like mint.com to do something like that, right? Or you can do it manually. But I do want to say that's important, right? That we're looking at our business expenses, but also in the market we're in right now with the economy as it is, that we look at our actual expenses, our personal expenses, right? 3 highlighters, green, pink, and if I had a yellow. Print out your bank statements. Print out your bank statements. I talked about this in March, right? I talked about this back in March. Green, every item that is an absolute necessity, right? For personal expenses, what is that? Green is if you have a mortgage, your mortgage, right? It's a necessity. Yellow are the things, I think we need this, but I'm not sure. Or maybe I can get this expense decreased. And red is that I don't need this. I am holding my money accountable and this is not getting me a result, right? Or I can use something else and it'll be cheaper. Or I can use something else and it'll be cheaper. So let me eliminate this, right? That's going to be really important, right? That's how you help yourself to play the red light, green light game, right? It's manual. I will tell you right now, that is a very important practice, that you are looking at your statements every single month minimum. Every single month minimum, right? What happens? Too often we set it and forget it. That's an exercise that Gary Keller talks about. I was talking with one of the millionaire agents in the company this last week, and he shared that he makes everybody on his team do that exercise, right? Every single month, on not only their business expenses, but their personal expenses. It seems like such a small thing. I was on a podcast with Ben Kinney, right? Ben Kinney is a killer in the business, multi-million-dollar business owner, real estate business, auxiliary companies. He's created his own massive empire. And that exercise seems pretty simple. He teaches his kids how to do that, right? He's even teaching his kids how to do that. So that's important, right? It's important that we are looking at our expenses regularly. Number 3, this one's fun, guys. Stick to a budget. Stick to a budget. Do you have a budget? To stick to a budget, you have to have a budget, right? Do you have a budget? Have you gone through and figured out what are your true expenses on a month-by-month basis? One of the reasons that I recommend that as you grow your real estate business, that at some point you do set up a legal entity. I think it's crucial to set up a legal entity for this business, is a couple reasons. One is taxes, right? It's just gonna be better on your taxes. Talk to an accountant about that. I am not a financial advisor, and I'm not an accountant to give that sort of accounting advice. and yet talk to them about the benefits of taxes. And we'll bring one in again to add them onto the calendar. The second part of that is that in real estate, what happens? So let's look at just not even accounting seasonality. Let's just look at what happened with COVID-19, right? January was great. February was great. March dropped. Market dropped, right? April, market dropped. May, the market started going back up, started recovering a little bit. June started recovering a little bit. July was hot, right? Super hot market. Peaks and valleys. What we don't want is, let's say that you're on track to close 12 deals a year. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to close a deal every month. It might mean that one month there's one deal, another month there's no deals, another month there's 3 deals, right? We like to create predictability and consistency, and yet we know that that's not always the case. That's why running your business like a business is so important. Do you pay yourself a salary and keep the rest of the money in your account instead of spending it all in one place, right? Because it's different from getting a monthly income. When you get a monthly income, you know, okay, monthly income, depending on your job, I'm going to get, you know, $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 this month, right? Whatever that might be on a monthly income, it's a fixed number. In real estate, what happens? In January, I got 10,000. In February, I didn't get anything. In March, 30,000, right, in commissions. And all of a sudden, we have increased income one month, no income another month, right? The peaks and valleys of just part of the business. Sometimes the deal extends. Now, all of a sudden, we don't have a fixed income coming in every single month, which is why we need to make sure that we're not spending it all in one place. We're not like, hey, all of a sudden I've got 30, 40, 50,000 in my account because of the deals I closed. This month I'm going to go buy a car, right? That's not sticking to a budget. That's not sticking to a budget. So it's important that we stick to a budget so we can move through that natural rhythm of the real estate business. Now I'm going to note, if you look at the chart on page 157, right, on page 157, that is actually the breakdown. And I'm going to note, this chart is being rewritten, right? This chart is being rewritten. I'll explain why in a second. This chart is going to give you, based on GCI, right? So let's say based on a GCI of 180,000, the cost of sales, we go by what's called the 30-30-40 model. 30% is generally, that's what people see on average in a lot of cases. In a millionaire business, generally you're going to see the 30-30-40 model. 30% cost of sales, 30% expenses max, and 40% profit, right? Profitability. That's best practices on a large business. Now, when your business is smaller, I'm going to be honest, you guys, your profit margin should be a lot higher. Okay? Your profit margin should be higher because in a smaller business, you don't have that many expenses yet. But on average, in a millionaire real estate business, 40% is the profit margin. Okay? So I know that gets a little complicated. So if you look at this chart, right? If you look at this chart, this is giving you best practice percentages for profit, for expenses, and for net income, right? For net income and cost of sales. The most difficult ceiling that a top producer faces is when they move from about 10 million in production. Once they hit 10 million and they're trying to get to that next level, most agents at that level of business, 10 million in volume, and they're moving to that next level, most experience a dip in profitability, right? Most experience a dip in profitability because while they're setting up systems of a bigger business, right, it takes away from productivity time. That is the most frustrating for a top producer, is trying to get past that 10 million mark and figuring out that they're making less money for a little while, right? Until they grow the business again, right? Until they grow the business again. So that's one of the, they say that that 10 million to 15 million mark is the hardest in the business, right? Is the hardest in the business. Now, given, I want you guys to be aware of that, because when we look at this chart, so if you look at this in GCI, it goes 180K, 300K, 500,000, 800, and 1.2 million, right? And 1.2 million. When Gary wrote this book, that was about the average that agents were making. For Mega Camp, which I'm going to talk about at the team meeting, right? The top producers were doing over 10 million GCI. So they're rewriting the book because the chart ends and we have too many people in the company. We've created more $1 million agents at Keller Williams than at any other brand, at any other franchise, right? Because of the models and systems of this book. So they're rewriting it to take that into consideration, right? To make sure that that is included in. So this is a great starting point. Depending on what level of the business you are right now, right? You might be looking at the first one, right? You might be looking at the first one and saying, okay, let me really look at cost of sales, right? If I want to have a net income around 100K, right? So that net income right there is 99,700, a little bit less than 100K, $300 less, right? But based on 180K in GCI. So you may be starting there, right? You may be starting there. So this is just going to be really important to have an understanding of the numbers. Are there any questions? Feel free to drop questions in the chat box while I let you know what the next pages we're going to be covering are. Next week, we are going to cover the organizational model, 158 to 172, right? Pages 158 to 172, the organizational model. We're going to go through a little bit on the, we may talk a little bit on the expenses around it, but what I'm really going to do and what I encourage you to look at is this is a little bit about the hiring process. What I also want to look at is your individual organizational model. Where within the org model are you? Where do you want to be? What's the intention to grow to? We're going to be looking at that. We are also going to be looking at org charts that are not in the book. Next week, I'm going to show you things that are not in this book, right? I'm going to show you where to find some absolutely phenomenal resources in KW Connect for once leverage is a part of your business. And I'm going to share why it's important to create your organizational model for the future. Now, we're going to do some future pacing, right, next week. So what I'm going to ask you is next week that you make sure you have a piece of paper and a pen, right? Make sure you have a piece of paper and a pen, because I'm going to share an exercise that we're going to kind of go through on org chart. Fair? All right, awesome. I know this is, I will say this, guys, numbers are not always as sexy, right? When we're talking about budgets, they're not always that sexy. And I will say this one activity gives you the sexiest results, right? The money, the actual profitability. Profit is sexy. Talking about budgets is not. And it's an integral part of it. It's like what do they say? It's we like the results of summer body, but we don't like going to the gym and calorie counting, right? It's necessary. It's necessary. The more passionate you can get about your money, the better. Right? We got to get passionate about our money. So with that, we're going to finish up today. You guys, at 1 p.m. today, we have our team meeting. We have some absolutely amazing announcements. We've got an awesome raffle going on. I'm going to share with you guys some strategies around how you can even get your mega camp ticket for free. Oh, right. So definitely make sure that you are on. I'm going to be sharing some awesome news around that. There's going to be a lot of really cool announcements. I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, I'll see you all later. Bye, guys.